The Marathon sales numbers just leaked, and let me tell you, it is horrible. It is one of the most disappointing things I have ever seen in my entire life. And pat yourselves on the back, boys, because we predicted exactly this scenario. Beautiful, is it not, to always be right?
I'd like to preface this video by talking about the ridiculously high bars that corporations set for developers when it comes to what's considered a success. And we have seen just insane sales figures for.
Before we get into this video, I would like to preface how absolutely uneducated some YouTubers are when talking about these subjects. Young, yeah, is unironically looking at Marathon, made by Bungie, you know, the company that made Destiny. You know, the game that they decided to sunset because they have ruined it too much, and then they decided to launch Marathon, and he's unironically sitting here and saying, well, it's why does Bungie expect to have good sales numbers like for Destiny? Because Marathon was supposed to replace Destiny. How do these people not understand? When a company sells 1 million of X, then the next time they do something, they're not thinking about, okay, now we need to aim 2 times lower. We need to aim at 200k sales, not a million sales. No one does that. In the games industry, no one does that.
Games who ultimately still ended up being disappointing in sales or, still resulted in layoffs and whatnot. So, for example, EA recently laid off staff across all Battlefield studios despite record-breaking Battlefield 6 launch. We're talking about the first time
we talked about this. How can you be this clueless about life? I swear, YouTubers should be forced to also have a normal everyday job so they don't become this absolutely out of touch from reality. All of these people should be forced to do a 9 to 5 in McDonald's for a week every month just so they understand that the real world is not what they read on the internet.
That Battlefield ever beat Call of Duty. We're talking about a game that surpassed 20 million copies sold within a couple months as of December of 2025. We're talking about a game that ultimately was the best-selling game of last year, of 2025, and somehow that still wasn't enough. You know why? Because back in July of 2025, it was reported EA expects Battlefield 6 to have 100 million players, 3 times more than the series' best seller. Or let's talk about Sony and the way they recently shut down developer Bluepoint Games, best known for remasters and remakes such as the Shadow of Colossus remake and the Demon's Souls remake. This was one of Sony's most acclaimed studios, but they were set up for failure when they were assigned a God of War live service that ended up getting canceled, and then the studio got shut down because their financial input just wasn't good enough. And more recently, Sony shut down Dark Outlaw Games, the PlayStation first party founded by former COD Zombies director Jason Blundell. And so aptly, people are
no idea what that even is.
Highlighting all of the various studios that Sony acquired and then promptly shut down, studios that had a lot of potential. And one of their biggest acquisitions by far is none other.
They shut them down because they didn't have potential.
Than Bungie, the developers of Destiny and now Marathon. And there's a lot riding on Marathon's success. And recently a report came out with estimated...
Oh, by the way, everyone, since we're not doing a look at the graph video about Marathon today, and I know, I feel a little bit sad also because I'm not doing it, because today is a special day. It is the first day where Marathon officially has gone under 40k concurrent players. Beautiful. You love to see it. 39.6, I think it was. It's, it's a little bit under 40k, but it's under 40k, boys. What a time to be alive indeed.
It's sales figures for Marathon, and I want to discuss what those numbers mean and what it ultimately represents for the future of Marathon and Bungie as a development.
Oh geez, Young is gonna explain me how the financial world operates. Oh, we could not have wished for a more talented voice actor. Talented, okay? Talented with a capital T. Actor with also the big A. Person of voice to tell us how finance works. I'm sure this is not gonna kill me inside in any way. I'm sure I'm not gonna want to rage quit this video.
Studio. The thing is, when you look at the player numbers for Marathon, you can see that it's found an audience that keeps coming back to this game. It didn't launch to the greatest all-time peak concurrent player numbers, but a lot of players are coming back, and you can see that.
I will not explode, even though I already want to, because even the first sentence is stupid lie proven wrong by the graph right here, but I will not engage. Young made this video probably specifically to bait me, and it's working. It's working.
While there is a bit of a steady decline, people are kind of receptive.
A bit of a steady decline, Lamau. It's been 2 weeks and the game has lost 50% of its sting, and no, I will not fall into the trap.
To the title and are hooked enough that overall we're seeing a relatively stable trend line, one that is slowly going downwards.
Yeah, stable trend line that's going downwards. Yeah, that's not good.
But the reception trending Marathon overall since its announcement has seen a massive turnaround, with the people who engage with this game having a pretty positive time overall, with the Steam review score right now from 29,814 reviews sitting at a very positive score of 86%. And all that is great to see, but there is the player perspective and then there is the corporate perspective. The reason I prefaced the video with all of that information was because you need to know that corporations have certain bars when it comes to commercial performance, and
whatever this bar is gonna correlate 1-to-1 with what Bungie sold in the first month for Destiny 2, or Destiny in general, maybe even. Whoever wants to look this up and then write a comment that I was right, surprise, surprise, please do so, thank you.
Revenue expectations and units sold expectations that, if not met, can lead to, layoffs and lead to pretty consequential developments for a development studio. And we have seen situations where even studios who ship really successful titles still face consequences, are still being afflicted by layoffs and unfortunate developments that you'd think wouldn't happen given the successes that they've been able to achieve. And so that's where the concern is. It's not about whether Marathon's reception is positive or whether, players keep coming back. It's ultimately about, did the game sell enough? Is it continuing to sell well? And are those numbers enough for Sony? And where were Sony's expectations? Were they too high for Marathon? And as a result, will it mean that its sales figures ultimately still won't be enough for the corporate mindset of the executives? So with all that in mind, let's check out this report from the Alinea Insight newsletter, which talks about how Marathon has apparently sold 1.2 million copies across Steam, PS5, and...
Oh, 2 weeks in and 1.2 million copies with all this publicity and all across all platforms. My minimum for Marathon was what? 700k sold first week? And then around that point, we also upgraded it to probably 1 million copies sold, or, this much until 1 million copies sold. And I said that, 1.5 million copies sold maybe is their best case scenario by the end of the month at this rate. And, well, needless to say that if this information is right, then they're not gonna hit that goal. Oh, this is bad. This is as bad as it gets. Oh, no.
Xbox, which for a game like Marathon, which is AAA, which spent a lot of time, money, and resources, and which was in development for as long as it was, 1.2 million copies, you can't necessarily consider that a resounding success given the kind of budget that these kinds of games tend to have, and given the kinds of high bars that corporations set for products like these when it comes to the kind of commercial performance they need to achieve for the corporations to deem the investment worthwhile. The article further breaks down sales figures as follow. Apparently, 70% of the audience, about 800,000 copies, were sold via PC, via Steam.
Oh, why are you constantly looking at Steam sales? They're not accurate. The PlayStations, the Xboxes, they matter so much. By the way, remember that post that's declared the sales of Marathon or whatever that I told was instantaneously lies because none of the data seems to prove it? Yeah, I told you. And this was one of the reasons, because we had confirmation that like 60+% of Marathon sales were on Steam, which is, by the way, above average even. So 70% is insane. This is why we don't care about the console sales. This is why we don't care about any sales. I remember we looked at the Xbox sales for this. When Marathon came out, literally day 2 or day 1, I don't remember when I exactly watched it, Marathon was sitting on Microsoft's Play Store, number 55 or something like that. Maybe it was 66, 7. 7! Anyway, it was somewhere around those lines where you don't even have 1K active fucking players.
Meanwhile, PS5 takes about 19% of Marathon sales, only 217,000 units, which is significantly lower than the roughly 800,000 units sold through Steam. And then Xbox accounts for the smallest piece of the pie at around 11%, or 133,000 units sold on that platform. The fact that the PS5 version of Marathon only accounted for 19% of sales no doubt will come as a bit of a disappointment for Sony, because the units sold on PlayStation 5, they get to keep 100% of.
This should not be even close to a disappointment for Sony, because they anticipated this, because the audience that is playing Destiny should be playing Marathon, and they knew on which console or PC or whatever the fuck their own players are playing. They expected this. They knew this is gonna happen.
Of the revenue, since Bungie is now a first-party Sony and PlayStation studio, whereas every unit sold on Steam, they have to give a revenue cut of that to Steam itself, and so they make less money by...
And for every microtransaction,
selling more games on Steam rather than selling more games on PlayStation. But at the end of the day, Sony does know that the most important thing for a live service is the biggest reach possible, which is why, while recent reports suggest that Sony is pulling out of releasing their first-party single-player exclusive games on PC and keeping those relatively...
How do you even put those sentences side by side? Sony understands that maximizing reach is important, so that's why they're gonna leave the platform that sells the most copies. How do you say that with a straight face? I mean, this is not everyone watching this is like, that sounds stupid, because you're right, it does. We're smart people, and Young's here Young's literally here sitting, stringing these sentences together like fucking Picasso. Probably should have not used the painter for that, but, actual position. Mozart! It doesn't matter. It literally does not matter.
To PS5, when it comes to their first-party live services, those will always come out on basically all platforms, or at the very least on...
You know what? At the end of the day, at least Young stopped wearing tank tops. So that's a win in my book.
PlayStation 5 and PC. But worth highlighting is how Marathon sales figures compare to competitions both from outside of Sony and PlayStation and even within Sony and PlayStation. It's impossible not to bring up Arc Raider sales figures, given that they're competing in kind of the same genre, which they go about in different ways, but they're both extraction shooters that pull a lot of attention away and require a lot of time investment.
By the way, remember when before Marathon launched, everyone was like, Arc Raiders over party, Marathon's gonna destroy Arc Raiders, the hype is real, Arc Raiders is dead. And now all of this is like, it was a joke, Chut. Why are you taking it seriously? No, it wasn't a joke. Everyone knows you were actually dumb enough to think that.
investment in order to be able to thrive in these games. And Arc Raiders, as of February of 2026, was reported to have sold 14 million units. Now, of course, Arc Raiders has had a couple months to get to that sales figure, but there was always an indication that Arc Raiders was headed towards those kinds of numbers based on Steam charts.
Wait. Didn't Arc Raiders actually announce when they sold 5 million copies or 7 million copies or something like that? It wasn't even the first month. It was like the first 2 weeks.
Arts trends, and just based on the popularity of the game, Marathon just isn't seeing numbers that suggest 14 million units sold in a couple months. Even right now, comparing Marathon's Steam concurrent player numbers to Arc Raiders, you can see just what a massive difference there is. 24-hour peaks of almost 120,000 players for Arc Raiders versus Marathon's 42,000 players. And even right now, as I'm recording this video, 90,278 players are playing Arc Raiders versus the 22,346 players for Marathon. Arc Raiders numbers from launch day, launch week, and beyond always indicated that it was a massive blockbuster hit, that it was going to sell in the realm of, over 10 million units. Marathon just doesn't indicate that at all. Even comparing Marathon to another Sony and PlayStation live service, Helldivers 2, Marathon's numbers just pale in comparison. As of January of 2026, Helldivers...
Most of them on Steam. Surprise, surprise.
2 had sold...
And by the way, this is also one of the reasons why I talked about Sony's decision to go exclusive and ditch Steam for a lot of their games is insane. It's never gonna... It is never gonna work out.
Over 20 million units.
At the end of the day, the meme is real. They all come crawling back to Steam.
And yes, that's years after the game's launch. But looking at Steam numbers, you can see just how much more explosive Helldivers 2's launch was compared to Marathon. And even now, it retains player numbers that are higher.
Yeah, by the way, this is what I'm expecting for to happen to Arc Raiders in like a month or two. I'm expecting 60k players unless some kind of massive update doesn't hit or something like that. I'm expecting roughly 40 to 60k players.
Than Bungie's own Marathon. 24-hour peaks of 57,888 players as of the recording of this video compared to Marathon's 42,091 24-hour peak concurrent players. And right now, over 44,000 players are playing Helldivers 2 versus Marathon's, a little over 22,000 players. Understand that...
We don't talk about enough about how actually insanely resilient Helldivers are. Helldivers is one of those things that truly is as resilient as it gets.
Sony spent $3.6 billion acquiring Bungie. They want to make a return on that investment. And while Marathon does have a dedicated audience that does come back, while the reception trending it has shifted to more positive leaning, the question ultimately is all of this enough for Sony specifically? And when I look at all of the circumstances where even after a game's successful launch, the development studio were punished for it with layoffs and whatnot, where it was still not deemed a success, or I think about how Hi-Fi Rush launched to pretty good numbers.
I knew it. Hi-Fi Rush, the golden apple of not understanding how companies work. Okay, listen. They make a game that's profitable and people get laid off, and then there is the fucking ultimate throne, the crown, the kingmaker, Hi-Fi Rush. It exceeded sales expectations like 5 times or something, and the studio still got shut down. How is this possible? Well, maybe because Hi-Fi Rush was supposed to be their attempt at breaking into the Japanese, aka Asian market, and it fucking failed horribly on that. And that was the point of Hi-Fi Rush. Because I have been talking, I predicted this, 4 years ago? 5 years ago? That one of the reasons why Xbox is going to lose against PlayStation is the fact that their East Asian sales are non-existent compared to PlayStation, and that's going to be a huge difference because one, there's a huge market there, obviously. a whole culture that is slowly beginning accepting gaming as a decent thing, aka Japan. And most importantly, the fact that PlayStation is already the super predominant console there that has hundreds of thousands of sales, while Xbox is literally struggling to get 10K at years ago this was. And I remember this because it was obvious from an analytical perspective that this is gonna be what's gonna make Xbox lose against PlayStation. Because that region is gonna grow, and Xbox is... And that's going to make a disparity. That's going to create a very visible... It already created a visible disparity at that time. And that was just going to grow over the years.
Numbers, a couple million units sold, and also won all kinds of awards, and still Xbox tried to shut down that studio. Just looking at all of the
What do you mean tried? They did.
Circumstances where even successful games, where numbers are impressive, and still... we see layoffs happen and the corporate heads deciding that those numbers are not enough.
If you hire a surgeon to do an operation on your liver and instead he does an operation on your dick, but the operation is a success no matter what, are you happy? No. You're probably pretty upset, in fact.
Marathon's 1.2 million copies sold as of right now, a couple weeks after launch. To me, just doesn't indicate a positive sign or a positive future, or that the bar that Sony was looking for Bungie to meet with Marathon has been met, and it kind of makes me fear for Marathon's future and Bungie's future. I think that Sony and PlayStation should continue to support Marathon. Clearly, it has enough legs that people...
They're gonna continue supporting it because literally Bungie has nothing else. I talked about this. Marathon is not going to be shut down in a year, or probably even 2 years, or maybe even 3 years. Because Bungie doesn't have anything cooking. Marathon was their literal last resort. And it failed. That's it.
Are coming back. Clearly, there's enough of a fun factor for those for whom Marathon clicks.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Marathon's numbers in 1 or 2 months when it's probably less than 10K. Anyway, that was a younger year, as always, as clueless as they get. It's beautiful. Have a nice day. Bye.